Let's jump right into this explainer. Have you ever wondered how a geopolitical crisis thousands of miles away ends up changing the literal fuel you put in your car? Well, today, we're looking at exactly that. The government is aggressively advancing its energy transition right now by establishing brand new standards for petrol containing up to 30% ethanol. It's a fascinating ripple effect, going from global macroeconomics right down to the engineering under your hood. To really get why the government is pushing so hard for higher ethanol blends, like right at this very moment, we first have to zoom out and look at the immediate macroeconomic shock. You see, we can't look at domestic energy policies in a vacuum. What happens in the Middle East has a direct, tangible impact on us, the everyday consumer, and on the broader economic stability of the entire country.
Moving into our first section, the global oil shock and currency crisis. Let's look at the stark numbers driving this urgent policy shift. It's basically a massive chain reaction that starts with crude oil and ends directly with the money in your pocket.
Case in point, global oil prices recently surged to $111 a barrel. Just let that sink in. This massive spike was triggered by escalating U.S.-Iran tensions and severe supply fears over potential disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz. When the threat of conflict looms over one of the world's absolute most critical oil choke points, global markets panic. And the result? The price of crude just completely skyrockets.
Now, because we are heavily dependent on imported oil, this $111 a barrel price tag acted as a direct tax on our economy. It triggered a huge wave of imported inflation. And the immediate casualty? The rupee. It actually crashed to a record low of 96.90 against the US dollar. Basically, every single drop of oil we import suddenly costs us significantly more.
And this timeline brilliantly illustrates the domino effect. You have a conflict abroad, which sparks supply fears, which then drives up imported inflation and ultimately tanks our local currency. It shows exactly how incredibly vulnerable an import-reliant economy really is to external geopolitical shocks.
So, the absolutely crucial question is figuring out how the government can shield our domestic economy from these vicious global cycles. Think about it. If we can't control the price of global crude oil, and we obviously can't control geopolitical conflicts, what variable can we actually change?
That brings us to Section 2. Enter E30, the biofuel shield. The solution here actually lies in fundamentally changing the chemical composition of the petrol we pump every single day. If we can't buy less fuel, we simply have to change what that fuel is made of. So the government has officially stepped in with a firm target set for May 15, 2026. The Bureau of Indian Standards notified a brand new framework, specifically IS 19850-2026, to regulate blending petrol with up to 30% anhydrous ethanol. They've introduced specific standards for E22, E25, E27, and E30 fuels. And by the way, anhydrous is really just a fancy way of saying ethanol that has had all the water completely removed. Make no mistake, this is a massive shift in our fuel diversification strategy.
Take a look at this chart. Notice that massive 85% slice of the pie? That represents imported crude. When you see that level of dependency, it explains exactly why we are so incredibly vulnerable to those global price shocks we were just talking about. We're effectively held hostage to global energy markets. But ethanol, which is produced domestically from agricultural byproducts, directly eats into that 85% imported slice.
Now, the really good news is we aren't starting from scratch here. We've actually already successfully crossed the 18% ethanol blending mark nationally. The government had previously advanced its target for E20, so that's a 20% blend, to the 2025-2026 supply year. But jumping from where we are right now all the way to a 30% target, that's an aggressive, calculated move to close that dangerous import gap even faster.
Moving to Section 3. Are our cars ready? Let's pivot to the automotive sector and see how this policy turns into a major engineering challenge for the actual vehicles we drive. Because changing the fuel is really only half the battle. The machines burning that fuel absolutely have to be ready for it. As we upgrade our highway infrastructure and our fuel stations to actually dispense these new blends, automakers are practically racing to adapt to these new chemical standards. It's becoming this massive synchronization effort between the petroleum industry, infrastructure developers, and the entire automotive industry. Think of it kind of like human digestion. Automakers have largely already transitioned to E20-compatible vehicles, so current engines can handle a little ethanol. It's like eating a mild spice, but pushing to E30? That's like serving your engine ghost peppers.
Higher ethanol concentrations are highly corrosive, so to prevent giving your car severe long-term heartburn, automakers have to validate fuel system durability, upgrade material compatibility, and create entirely new engine calibrations from the ground up.
And get this, the government isn't even stopping at 30%. They are actively looking down the road, already proposing draft amendments to recognize E85 and even completely pure E100 flex fuels. This sends a huge signal about the broader policy direction. They want to dynamically manage our energy mix and truly prepare the entire ecosystem for a flex fuel future.
Which brings us to Section 4, the road to independence. Let's wrap things up by looking at what this entire energy transition actually achieves for the country and, more importantly, for you, the consumer. Why go through all this crazy engineering and logistical effort?
Well, accelerating our ethanol blending achieves 4 massive goals. First, it directly lowers our massive import bills, keeping that capital inside the country. Second, it gives a huge economic boost to domestic agriculture by quite literally turning crops into fuel. Third, it significantly cuts down on harmful vehicular emissions. And finally, it creates a strategic economic shield protecting our currency from the wild chaos of global oil spikes.
As the global energy landscape remains incredibly volatile, with ongoing geopolitical tensions keeping crude prices elevated, this push for E30 is not just an environmental policy. It is a vital economic defense strategy. Which leaves us with one final, kind of provocative question about your own readiness for this shift. When you go out to buy your next vehicle, will it be flex fuel ready to handle the fuels of the future?
I really hope this explainer helped you connect the dots between major global events and our own domestic fuel standards. If you found this breakdown helpful, please hit that like button, share this with a friend, and subscribe to the channel. And hey, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Drop a comment below with your feedback, or let me know if you'd actually consider buying a flex fuel vehicle.